Assalamu alaikum, welcome in program Debate Aya with your host Tariq Khan. Today we'll analyze and explore the Russia's geo-economic and political relations with the West. Let me bring, and it is honor for me to introduce Professor Dr. Oxana. Ma'am, thank you so much for joining, and you are most welcome in program. Ma'am, what is the likelihood of improving in Russian-American relations as a result of Biden's accession to power? What is your analysis?
First of all, thank you for inviting me, and I'm really happy to join you and to share my ideas and my opinion about the future of Russia and the West relations, and maybe not just West but also the East. And first of all, what I would like to say is that we are living in a very unique moment of our life. We are living in a situation of a dramatic change of the world order, and it also affects not only the US and Russia relations, but the relations between all actors globally. It is also not about the pandemic that really influences heavily what's going on, but also we are experiencing the change that is made by the new presidency in the US, and quite recently Biden comes to his presidency, and what to expect from his from this person. It's a very interesting and not easy to answer question, specifically concerning the relations between Russia and the US. And in this context, I would say that, first of all, don't be very optimistic about the improvement between our states, I mean US and Russia. First of all, we have a heritage carried by the Cold War, when the US and Russia played its focal roles. Today, we are experiencing the dramatic change when Russia already not the structured power of these global relations, and we will have a new actors came and coming into the global arena. So this is the first point. The second point for me is very important. We have to realize that Biden served for a long time within the Obama presidency, and he played a crucial role in the foreign policy of the US. So we can somehow estimate that he will continue his global projects, and if you remember the kind of interventionist foreign policy, as the most optimistic scenario during Biden's presidency. And the third point, we will have definitely some steps that Biden already made and is going to make, in sense of be a real opponent toward the Trump foreign policy as well as domestic policy actions. In these circumstances, what we are observing now, for instance, some negotiations about arms control actions and treaty, and it sounds very optimistic, but Again, do not be very idealistic and very optimistic about this step, because um, the most optimistic scenario is that this treaty will be not the only, but among very few steps for enhancing Russia-US relations. We will have some interesting steps of mutual interests, and this is my mm, one more point for consideration and for future analysis. So we still have some points for mutual cooperation and for possible mutual interests articulations. For instance, cybersecurity is one among such points. But Biden, in his presidential speech, as well as in his pre-presidential um, speeches, he didn't even mention the idea or his willingness to enhance relations with Russia. It means that it's hardly expectable that Biden would like to change dramatically and to enlarge cooperation with Russia in the future. It also concerns the case of North Pipe and this kind of deal, which really concerns and affects EU-Russia relations. But for the US, it looks like Biden will somehow step in the opposite direction to what Trump did during his last days in the White House. It means that Biden, for some reason, would allow continuation of this kind of EU-Russia cooperation in the energy sector, but this case will not be the real case and the real signal and symbol of the enhancing of the overall enhancing of the US EU Russia relations.
Ma'am, what sort of relationship does Russia wants with Europe, and can we expect a warming of European and Russian relationship?
Thank you for question. It's really not again not easy to answer question because we observed in some years during some years before today, not enhancing, not warming, but freezing relations between EU and Russia. We hoped on the best that EU and Russia would possibly keep and would continue cooperation, but the most possible scenario is so-called partnership, and this partnership will concern the most important sectors and directions in economies, I mean the economy of the EU and Russia. Today, we observe that Russia and the EU are losing their so-called index of interdependence, So these neighbors are becoming more independent from each other in sense of different aspects of economic, social, and political development. And of course, we will have again a kind of cooling partnership where the most important part in our cooperation will be national, so-called national interests. Specifically, Russia will definitely follow this idea of national interests concerning all relations, specifically bilateral relations with the most valuable partners throughout the world. So the most optimistic scenario is that we will continue our cooperation in the most important sectors such as energy sector, security sector, and in some cases peacekeeping actions. The most important part of in our relations. But we will definitely lose a lot of close cooperation sectors, specifically in the political sphere because of strong disagreements. And political sphere is not about domestic reforms, democratization, and all other very important and very painful spheres of negotiations and mutual disagreements, but also foreign policy. And we have such disagreements within joint neighborhood sphere as well.
Pandemic so far has demonstrated the inability of global leaders to act together for the common good. So, can we expect such a serious threat to reshape the global agenda of interstate cooperation?
Actually, the pandemic really questions this idea of the global public good and cooperation and mutual trust among global actors and among nation states around the world. Um, what interesting is that we really see that global leaders and regional leaders as well um, are unable to act together. Instead of this probable scenario, we observe the disagreements and even disintegration in sense of cooperation of leaders to fight the pandemic. So this and that is interesting that what we will have, I suppose, is more regional cooperation for mutually accepted interests, and as also maybe bilateral interests and bilateral cooperation instead of global answers and global cooperation to fight, to struggle this global threat, which is called the pandemic. It demonstrated that we are not united, and the globalization is far from its optimistic development toward the united world with trust and ability to cooperate. If we look at answers that different nation states have given to the pandemic, we see that some nation states just deny to accept that this is the global threat. And it means that this concerns not only one, two, three, um, the most troubled countries in the world, and it is not a bad luck, but this denial demonstrated that the nation states do not really estimate properly the result and consequences of this pandemic to not only to the national development, which we already observed now, like economic decrease and political um, struggle of and movement toward more authoritative power instead of democratic, and etc. So we see that many of global actors just underestimate how pandemic will influence the global world. I mean, not just the nation states, but globally. And as earlier as we accept that we can do nothing without help of all actors, of all states around the world, the earlier we can start our recovery from this global, about apocalyptic pandemic and apocalyptic threat to the world.
What are the main challenges facing the Russian foreign policy, and how does President Putin see the world and Russia's place in it?
Um, well, it's an interesting question again because the tendency is that uh, Russia is going to play the crucial role and the as a global leader, um, and this leadership is not the result of the Cold War when we have two leaders like US and Russia, and this struggle really structured the global world order. What we are having now is the idea that Russia is going to play its global leadership role, and specifically through macro-regional policy. At the same time, we have to understand that Russia prefers to deal with other actors on the basis of bilateral agreements. And this is not like a multilateralism that we really see if we deal with the EU. So in these circumstances, Russia will continue its policy as on the basis of bilateral agreements, on the basis of mutual interests. So I would emphasize that the core idea of the foreign policy provided by the Russian Federation will be national interest, and every and each partnership will be considered for its potential to serve this national interest. And in this, so this understanding would help us to build relations between different global leaders, regional actors, and beyond. So what we will see in the nearest future is how the global world order will be changed in accordance with these national interests, um, promotion and prevalence.
What are the Russia's, European Union, United States interests, objectives, priorities, and policies in Ukraine? What is your analysis?
Um, for sure, the clue for understanding of the role of what role Ukraine will play in this very complicated relations between Russia and the EU, Russia and the US. The clue is that Ukraine is located within the so-called mutual neighborhood between the EU and Russia. And this neighborhood is equally the sphere of interest, national interest of Russian Federation, as well as interests articulated by the European Union um, toward what is called Eastern Partnership countries. For sure, what we will expect, Ukraine will play a crucial role not for cooperation, but for continuation of this, not struggle, but for these disagreements between the EU and Russia, first of all. And we cannot forget about the role that US plays in the same region of neighborhood, or would like to play. For the US, this Ukraine is a wonderful platform for the next expansion of the NATO, and this like a military power extension is also a clue for understanding what role the US will play not with in the relations with Ukraine, but also within the neighborhood region. For Russia, Ukraine will be also one of the core of the focal points in its foreign policy. And what we will observe is that Ukraine will be one of the most of the of crucial importance in sense of future development or maybe future cooling of partnership between the EU and Russia. So we are not going to expect, we are far from being optimists that the case of Ukraine will stand somehow beyond the interests. Instead of this, at least for 10 years more, we will have a struggle and negotiations about and around the Eastern neighborhood countries and Ukraine as well.
Ma'am, thank you so much for your valuable input and analysis on the Russia's geo-economic and political relations with the West. And thank you so much for joining.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure for me.